Hey guys, Patrick Walker, DallasCowboys.com. Two questions. The first I'll lead to Shadi, kind of circling back to what Jerry and Steven both said as far as freshening things up, looking for a change. From a head coach perspective, that's going to key in on the offense. Generally speaking, how do you look to move forward as far as modernizing the offense? You talk about solving for the quarterback. What does that look like under a Schottenheimer era?
Yeah, again, I go back to my days with Pete. I think if you go back and you look at some of the things we did in Seattle, obviously the starting point for me would be things that our players do well. You're always going to start with that. If your system's not flexible enough to do what your players do well, then you're probably in the wrong business. But I'm a big believer in cut splits. I'm a big believer in shifts and motions to distort things. We're going to do a great job of marrying our runs and our passes and make those look the same. I'm proud to say that two different times in my career as a coordinator, we led the league in rushing, and they go hand in hand. The running game and the action passing game go hand in hand. But I would say there's a tempo element that we're excited to mix in, that our players have all shown an affinity for. And let me expand on that a little bit. Why do players like tempo? Well, they like tempo because it allows them to play free. You guys have heard some of the play calls. Dak could rattle off 4 or 5 of them right now. They're pretty long. So when you go fast and you're playing on the ball, these guys, it's a little bit more like pickup basketball, you know. And those would probably be the biggest things that I would say from an offensive standpoint.
From a personnel and roster building standpoint, salary cap management as well for Jerry and Steven, you guys talk about learning some hard lessons, especially from 2024, depth issues once you guys were ravaged by injury. Just as far as salary cap management goes, free agency and the like, looking in the mirror is one way that you can learn things. Another way is to look at what your opponents and enemies are doing and try to kind of take from their strategies. When you look at a team like the Eagles, for example, do you feel there's anything that you guys can kind of take from their strategies, seeing as they handle free agency a certain way and they're back in the Super Bowl this year, that kind of could work for the Cowboys going forward?
Yeah, I think you certainly look at that. I think you look at your competitors in your conference, you know, what it's going to take to have success, whether that's a 49er team or whether that's an Eagle team. Obviously, the 49ers, you know, had the injury bug situation, and you know, in this salary cap era, if that injury bug hits you hard enough, it's, you know, it can be difficult to overcome. And but at the same time, you know, that's the goal, is to, you know, really do a good job with your draft, college free agency. That should be where your strong depth is. Obviously, this year we were counting on playing those guys right away, and they had to jump right in, and as the injuries came, more and more had to jump in. And but I think the bigger thing here is just where can we, you know, which has been our goal in the past, where can we, you know, in free agency take care of some core needs, so that when the draft comes, you are able to take the best player on the board, not unlike we did with CD. We weren't necessarily in that draft looking for a receiver, but CD Lamb's sitting there, and you know, it's obvious what you do there. And I think if you do some things in free agency, you know, like we've done in the past, to really take care of your roster before the draft comes around, you have a much better chance. But certainly, you look at the blueprints. Everybody does it different. Kansas City's doing a great job bringing young guys along, and you know, those type of things. And like a team like Philadelphia, you certainly look at the way they're doing it, where they went out and you know, did some things with some veteran players. You have to take a look at that, and then you got to find exactly what fits your core, your DNA with our players and what we have, and what gives us the best chance to compete against. Certainly, you start with your division, the Eagles, the Commanders, and the Giants, and then you stretch that out, and what does it take you know, to beat the 49ers, to beat the Rams? Certainly those are all things that come in the mix.
I'll answer this. It's money management. Cap is financial. When I bought the Cowboys, several of your counterparts rode over with me on this little jet airplane, rode over to my home in Little Rock, Arkansas. And we got off the plane, and rolled up there to pick us up was a 5-year-old dirty Ford Bronco. And they got off and said, this doesn't make a lick of sense. You just bought the Cowboys and you're flying a jet and you drive up here in a 5-year-old dirty Bronco. And I said, it makes perfect sense. You can't have it all. You got to sacrifice someplace to get the other. If you try to have it all, you can pay the fiddler when you've used up your credit. That's salary cap. That's a salary cap. Not one that we won't hear, oh, what about that team? They've got the same salary cap issue you do, and they've got that done. Well, it's because all teams are different, and they've made those decisions as they've moved along. We want to improve significantly how we are doing the cap. The cap takes a big hit when you're investing in players that have injuries, significant injuries. So the cap can take a big hit at that time, cap management. But it's still there. It's still there. It's as real as if it was never there, the availability of it. And so if somebody thinks it's daunting, I try to answer you when we're talking. And so you hear me talk about, well, we have to manage the cap. Why not this free agent? Why don't you go do this? Not necessarily why didn't you go do that with that, or the timeliness of how you did it, but why didn't you go do that? That's all management, okay? I want our fans to know that I can manage really good. I do real well managing. I do real well managing. I know that that bank account's full, that doesn't mean you got money. It just means you hadn't paid your bills due 60 days from now. So you got to look around the corner, you got to be good at it, and you got to live with the time that you're looking around the corner, okay? And so that's what you see here. No apologies. Everybody has to do it. We obviously hadn't done it well enough. I think our first Super Bowls that I was involved in were before the cap. And so we have to do a better job in that area. Can we? You bet you can. You bet you can. Now, all in, we just spent some of it for Dak. We spent some of it for Lamb. We spent some of it for several of our players. It was an allocation, an anticipation of what we weren't going to spend or not spend in the future. All of that said, we Stephen, me, spend a lot of time in this area. And I'm not talking about just sitting there in the office on a chalkboard. I'm talking about 3 o'clock in the morning when you can't sleep and you're sitting there doodling that cap.
Brad Sham, 105.3 The Fan. Brian.